The murder trial of disgraced South Carolina attorney Alex Murdaugh has just wrapped up. He was accused of murdering his wife and son, unthinkable acts. And the trial came on the heels of what was a downward spiral of monstrous proportions for this once prominent family. So we are going to go through it all. The boating accident that left a young woman dead, the marital problems, embezzlement, theft, drug addiction, and finally, murder. And the jury has now spoken. So what did they decide? Well, you're about to find out. Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we will cover everything you need to know about the Murdoch family and the murders. And it is a crazy case. Of course, we will look at exactly what happened on the night that the wife and the son of a prominent South Carolina family were found murdered in cold blood in June of 2021. But we will also look at other shocking events that happened both before and after the murders to help paint the picture of what actually happened on the night in question. We will also hit the highlights of the witness testimony during the trial. We'll talk about the theories that were presented by the prosecution and the defense, and then we'll look at the specific charges filed against Murdoch and how the jury ruled on each one. All in today's episode. If you enjoy the episode, hit that like button for me. If you got a comment, put it in the comment section below. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Smash that subscribe button now. So let's start with this last name, Murdaugh. Now, you would assume it's pronounced Murdaugh, but it's an old Southern name and the family pronounces it Murdoch. So in this video, I'm going with how the actual family says their own name because they would know, right? Next, let's introduce the family. Husband and patriarch Alex Murdaugh, aged 53, was married to wife Margaret Maggie Murdoch, 52. The couple had two kids, Richard Buster Murdoch and Paul Murdoch, aged 22. Now, Alex and Buster were both lawyers. The Murdoch family was a prominent family in the area, as 3 generations of the family had practiced law in South Carolina dating back to 1910. Now, at the time of the murders, Alex and Maggie were having marital problems, and she was actually staying at the family's beach house about an hour away from the family ranch where the murders took place. And son Paul, well, he had his own problems. Known as the black sheep of the family, he was an ornery party boy with a raging alcohol problem. He was awaiting trial in connection with a 2019 boat crash that left a 19-year-old woman dead. And the details of that incident are that in April of that year, Paul was arrested and later indicted on charges of boating under the influence causing death after he attended a party on Paris Island. Paul, who had allegedly been drinking, got behind the wheel of a boat with 5 passengers and crashed into a bridge piling at about 2 a.m. Now, everybody on board was injured. The boat was left a bloody mess, and a Mallory Beach, age 19, was thrown from the boat and killed. Paul had pled not guilty and was out on a $50,000 bond at the time he was murdered. Wife Maggie and son Paul would be the 2 that were murdered. The 2 would be survived by Alex Murdaugh and his other son Buster. So what happened? Well, on June 7th of 2021, agents with South Carolina law enforcement responded to a late night 911 call saying that 2 people were dead at a residence in Islandton, South Carolina. Upon arrival, law enforcement found Maggie and her son Paul dead at the family's 1,700-acre ranch. Alex Murdaugh would be questioned but then released by law enforcement as they sought to track down the unknown assailant. And if that wasn't bad enough, tragedy struck the family again 3 days later after the murders, when Alex's dad and well-known local prosecutor Randolph Murdoch, aged 81, would pass away as well. So this is June of 2021, and things were quiet over the summer. But drama would explode in early September of the same year. First, members of Alex's law firm would confront him about $1 million in money that was missing from the firm's trust accounts. Sources would report that Alex admitted his wrongdoing and agreed to resign from the firm. His partners would then notify law enforcement and the South Carolina Bar Association of this theft. Then, on September 4th of 2021, the very next day, Alex gets shot in Hampton County, South Carolina. Yeah, shot, like with a gun. The quote was, "He was shot in the head while he was changing a tire along the edge of the road." That coming from Alex's attorney speaking to People magazine. Alex would be airlifted to the hospital and treated. His lawyer would state that Alex suffered, quote, "an entry and exit wound, a skull fracture, and minor brain bleeding in 2 places." Law enforcement would state that agents were actively investigating what they classified as an attempted murder, and it all sounded very serious. However, 2 days later, we would learn that the wounds were actually superficial when Alex made a public statement saying that he was leaving his job at his law firm and entering drug treatment. Alex would state, quote, "The murders of my wife and son have caused an incredibly difficult time in my life. I have made a lot of decisions that I truly regret. I am resigning from my law firm and entering a rehab. I am immensely sorry to everyone I've hurt, including family, friends, and colleagues. I ask for prayers as I rehabilitate myself and my relationships." End quote. By September 8th, Alex's law license was temporarily suspended by the South Carolina Supreme Court. On September 13th, law enforcement announced that it had opened an investigation into allegations that Alex stole funds from his law firm. And then on September 15th of 2021, authorities would reveal what was maybe the most shocking revelation in this whole story. Remember when Alex was shot by the side of the road? Well, it turns out that Alex Murdaugh had arranged his own shooting. No joke. Authorities would state that Alex himself had arranged his own shooting death so that his son would receive $10 million in life insurance. So Curtis Edward Smith, Alex's cousin and drug dealer, was the man that Alex allegedly hired to kill him. And this was Alex's cousin Eddie. No, not this cousin Eddie, but the other cousin Eddie. According to Smith's arrest affidavit, Alex conspired with Smith, provided Smith with a firearm, and directed him to shoot him in the head. Smith would be arrested by law enforcement and charged with attempted assisted suicide, assault and battery, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Alex would be charged with conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and filing a false police report. Both Alex and Smith would admit to the plot, with Alex's lawyer saying his addiction to opioids and his depression following the June murders of his wife and son drove him to concoct the scheme. The lawyer went on to say that his client wanted his living son to claim the life insurance monies and believed that the $10 million policy had a suicide exclusion, not realizing that that exclusion had actually expired. So anyway, that was a big reveal by law enforcement, but they weren't done yet. Still on September 15th of 2021, law enforcement also announced that it was opening an investigation into the 2018 death of the Murdoch's housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, who died after what had been called a trip and fall accident at the family's home in Hampton, South Carolina. The investigation was launched because Satterfield's sons had settled a civil lawsuit against Alex and others, but claimed they never received the insurance payout concerning their mother's death. In the lawsuit, the sons allege that Alex actually approached them after their mother died, told them to sue him, and personally introduced the sons to a straw man who would act like their attorney during litigation. According to the complaint, Alex's insurance company settled claims associated with Gloria Satterfield's death and paid $4.3 million for the benefit of the sons. Problem was, the sons claimed they never received the money and that Murdoch kept it all. And so by this point, there was enough strangeness surrounding Murdoch that police announced that they would investigate Satterfield's death for any potential criminal liability, including exhuming Satterfield's body. Then on September 16 of 2021, Alex turns himself in, appears in court on the botched roadside shooting scheme, posts bond, and is released to go back to rehab. And then things were really quiet until October 13th of 2021, when Alex Murdaugh is revealed to be a person of interest in the murders of his wife and son. One of Alex's lawyers, Jim Griffin, would state that Alex was visiting his mother, who has dementia at the time of the murders, so he could not have done it. And furthermore, that he had no motive to kill them and was an innocent man. Regardless, the very next day, October 14th, Alex is arrested again and charged, not with murder, but with misappropriating the insurance settlement funds from his housekeeper Gloria Satterfield's wrongful death suit. Also on October 14th, the same day of Alex's second arrest, Curtis Smith, Cousin Eddie, the man accused of assisting with his botched suicide plot, claimed that Alex was never actually struck by a bullet. Smith went on the Today Show and said that he didn't actually shoot Alex. Smith alleged that on September 4th of 2021, Alex had asked him to meet him on a lightly traveled road in Hampton, which he did. But he claimed that when he got there, Alex was also holding a gun. And Alex said, "Are you going to shoot me?" And Smith said, "No." And Alex then said, "Well, you've got to do it." He said that the two then struggled over the gun and it went off, but Smith stated that he was 1,000% sure that the bullet did not hit either of them. In response to Smith's claims, Alex released medical records that showed that he was, in fact, shot in the back of the head, even though it was basically just a scratch. The records stated that he had, quote, 2 superficial bullet wounds to the posterior scalp with no active hemorrhage. The first shout out today goes to our presenting sponsor, Skillshare, the online learning community with instructional videos from industry leaders on just about any topic you can imagine. These are how-to videos focused on completing a specific project rather than just getting general information. It's practical learning on topics of your choice at your pace. Skillshare. Check out the link in the description below. In October of 2021, a grand jury would formally charge Alex Murdaugh with 27 counts of financial misconduct, alleging that Alex stole money from several of his clients and other lawyers in his law firm. On December 9th of 2021, a grand jury issued more indictments accusing him of 21 additional financial crimes. He was then up to 48 charges that alleged that Alex had stolen more than $6.2 million from his alleged victims. Finally, on June 21st of 2022, a grand jury issued even more indictments consisting of 23 new charges against Alex. So he was at 71 different charges at that point, and the total had reached 99 different charges as of present. That's 99 charges. That's insane. In February of 2022, the Murdoch estate, where the double homicide took place, was put up for sale for $3.9 million. Gonna need to sell some stuff to pay for all those legal fees, I suppose. And his legal troubles, they would continue into June of 2022. Alex was again indicted, this time in connection with an 8-year-old money laundering and painkiller distribution ring that he ran with Cousin Eddie. But as of June of 2022, he had still not been indicted for murder. That would come in July. On July 14, Alex Murdaugh was charged with the murder of his wife and son. Specifically, Alex was charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. After the charges were handed down, Alex's lawyers maintained their client's innocence in a statement. Quote, Alex wants his friends, family, and everyone to know that he did not have anything to do with the murders of Maggie and Paul. He loved them more than anything in the world. By July 15th, the very next day, some details of the night of the murder had leaked out. A law enforcement source close to the investigation said that on the night of the murders, Alex allegedly reached out to Maggie, asking her to meet him at the family's 1,700-acre ranch. Alex told Maggie that his 81-year-old father was in failing health and she needed to see him before he died. According to several sources, Maggie and Alex had been in a rough patch in their marriage. She was staying at the family's beach house on Edisto Island, approximately an hour away from the ranch. Anyway, Maggie initially declined to meet Alex at the cabin, suggesting that they just meet at the hospital instead. But she ultimately agreed to meet him at the property, planning to follow Alex to the hospital in her own vehicle. On her way to the house, Maggie would message a friend saying that something about her husband's behavior seemed fishy. Quote, he's up to something. And not long after that, Maggie and Paul were dead. From there, lots of legal mumbo jumbo takes place, but it all culminates in his murder trial that started on January 23rd of 2023. The trial began 17 months after Maggie and Paul's murder. It took 2 days to pick the jury, and then opening statements began on January 25th of 2023. And this case was admittedly by the prosecutors very circumstantial. The prosecution knew that Maggie and Paul were killed by different weapons, a rifle and a shotgun, but they didn't have the murder weapons. They didn't have an eyewitness. They didn't have any clothes with any blood on them. They didn't even really have a good motive, stating that Alex intended to use these deaths as a distraction from his other cases. It's pretty weak. What they did have was some very key pieces of evidence, including a Snapchat video that Paul had sent from his cell phone to several friends on the night of the murders. Paul had sent a cell phone video taken near the dog kennels of the ranch to a friend at 8:45 p.m. on the night of June 7th, 2021. The Snapchat video featured the voices of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This was a crucial piece of evidence because Alex had initially denied being anywhere near the dog kennels on the night of the murders. From there, the prosecution alleged that 4 minutes later, at approximately 8:49 p.m., Alex kills his wife and son. Then at 9:06 p.m., after prosecutors believed Maggie was dead, her cell phone camera briefly activated. Britt Dove, an employee of the Computer Crimes Unit, testified that her phone's camera activated in the background after it was moved to see if it would recognize a face that would unlock it. It did not unlock. At 9:47 p.m., Maggie receives a text from Alex that says, "Call me, babe." According to prosecutors, Alex sent the text after Maggie and Paul were already dead to create an alibi. Another important piece of evidence was that Alex wore 2 different shirts on the night of his wife and son's deaths, one before and one after the murder. The evidence came from the aforementioned Snapchat video where Alex is shown wearing a blue polo shirt and khakis at the property, and in police footage from later in the night when he was questioned, he is wearing a white t-shirt and shorts. Is that proof that he is a murderer? No, but it is indeed curious. And what about that alibi that he was visiting his elderly mother stricken with dementia? Well, a tearful Shelley Smith, the caregiver of Alex's elderly mother, testified that Alex did arrive for a brief visit on the night of the murders. She said he was carrying a blue tarp under his arm and acting fidgety. Smith also testified that Alex's visit lasted approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Alex had previously told police that the visit was twice that long. The prosecution alleged that Alex visited his mother simply to create an alibi. Jurors also learned details about Alex's alleged opioid addiction, including claims that he spent $50,000 a week on drugs. $50,000 a week? That's a $200,000 a month drug habit. I don't think so. Even if you're paying $50 a hydro, which you wouldn't pay moving that kind of volume, that's 4,000 pills a month. That's 133 pills a day. He wasn't taking 133 pills a day. Oh, he may have been taking fistfuls of the stuff, but he was obviously also selling those pills. And as Alex's attorney claimed, that Murdoch was doing this along with, of course, cousin Eddie. Anyway, the defense would call experts to say that the trajectory of the bullet from the rifle would indicate that the shooter was between 5 feet tall and 5 feet 2 inches. About a foot shorter than Alex. Another expert would allege that there were likely 2 shooters, as it is not likely that one killer would bring 2 different long guns to a murder. On rebuttal, the state's experts would dispute both of those theories. Defense attorneys also called son Buster Murdoch to testify about the murders of his brother and mother. Buster would shed a few tears on the stand while talking about the moment he learned that his mother and brother had been murdered. He testified that his dad said, "Are you sitting down?" And then he told me that my mom and my brother had been shot. Following the news, Buster and his girlfriend drove in from her home in Rock Hill, South Carolina, approximately 200 miles away. Quote, "He was heartbroken." Buster testified about his father's reaction when he arrived that night. Quote, "I walked in the door and saw him, gave him a hug. He was destroyed." Then, disgraced South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh took the stand in his own defense. While on the stand, Murdoch admitted to lying to law enforcement about his whereabouts on the day his wife and son were killed. Quote, "As my addiction evolved over time, I would get into these situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid," Murdoch would say on the stand. "I am sorry that I lied. What a tangled web we weave. Once I told a lie, then I told my family that lie, then I had to keep on lying." Part of Alex's testimony. Although he admitted to lying, Murdoch adamantly denied killing Maggie or Paul. Quote, "I could never intentionally do anything to hurt either of them. Not ever." Finally, Alex would testify that he believed it was a revenge killing waged against his son by a friend and or family of the victim of his son's boating accident from 2019. Ultimately, both sides would make their closing arguments. The prosecution focused on all of the lies that Murdoch had told, his incredible financial crimes and his debts, and the fact that he was with his wife and son at or near the time of the murders. The defense argued that there wasn't any hard proof that puts Alex Murdaugh pulling the triggers, that the shooter was a short man, and that there were likely 2 of them engaged in a revenge plot against Paul. Ultimately, after hearing over 75 witnesses and making a rare in-person visit to the ranch, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts, guilty of double murder. Then he was sentenced, and there was additional testimony, but it was a foregone conclusion that he would effectively spend the rest of his life in prison, as Alex faced a minimum of 30 years in prison for each murder, the prosecution having previously declined to seek the death penalty. In the end, the South Carolina Attorney General stated that their best piece of evidence was Alex Murdaugh himself. He said that Alex had spent his whole life persuading juries to do what he wanted them to do, and that it was that arrogance that he could do that again that sealed his fate. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button for me. If you got a comment or a question, put it in the comment section below. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. And if you want more information on this story, there is an excellent documentary on Netflix that takes a deep dive into the facts of Paul's boating accident, this family, and these murders. That's all I have for you today. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.